I'm done now. Hope it's wrong. Never loved you, never will. Sorry, 'cause you made me feel some kind of way. Hate the blood in my veins, hate the blood in my veins. Pictures bigger than this, can't you see it? I know those things you never said you do. Did them, you done them, you do them, you do them again. You did them, you done them, I speak up. 'Cause you don't want my love, that's obvious. Red lights only follow me. When like this, go to my feels, go to my feels. 'Cause you don't want my love, that's obvious. Red lights only follow me. When like this, go to my feels, go to my feels. It creates in my heart, you can't replace it. I'm calling out and I don't wanna say your name. You play these games, you fake this way, and I'm falling in, I'm falling in. 'Cause the pieces together, you're so careless. Stop being reckless. Like don't step to me, roll away like centipede. 'Cause you don't know where to stop me. Yeah, you don't know where my heart is. Don't think it's in my head. I'm over this, over this. Call the feds, I don't really care. It just bothers me that you're one of them. See you acting so stupidly. Take actions for actions' sake. 'Cause you don't want my love, that's obvious. Red lights only follow me. When I like this, when I like this. Call to my feels, call to my feels. 'Cause you don't want my love, that's obvious. Red lights only follow me. When I like this, when I like this. Call to my feels, call to my feels. Yeah. So that was You Never Said. I'm just going to quickly make a little edit sonically. Cool. So this next one is called Body Language. It'll be out late next month, a part of an EP that we're releasing later this year. Hope everybody enjoys this. It's going to be like a cool little stripped back version. So I hope you enjoy it. Slowly, yeah, please take me slowly, yeah. But I know like I was rich, never had nothing like this. Oh no, 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 took it like I love the way you hold me, yeah, love the way you hold me, yeah. Please take me slowly, please take me slowly. But I know like I was rich, never had nothing like this. Oh no, 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 took it like Kylie. Oh fucking hurt, this shit's drowning me. Like 24 years in the making. I never had someone, no, I hate it. Get close and run, oh, I hate this. I need this moment more than you know. I know I speak too much, you hate it. Send me out until I'm angry. Fall down like I love you, baby. Love the way you hold me, yeah. Love the way you hold me, yeah. Please take me slowly, yeah. Please take me slowly. Burn out like I was rich, never had nothing like this. Oh no, 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 took it like Kylie. Love the way you hold me, yeah. Love the way you hold me, yeah. Please take me slowly, please take me slowly. Burn out like I was rich.
Uh, Welcome to Express Yourself, the fourth instalment of Our New Normal, a weekly series of webinars brought to you by Music SA. My name is Joel Byrne and I'm one half of the industry development team. And tonight we'll be discussing music PR. What is it? Should you pay for it and how much? How does it factor in when releasing music? And what more can artists do to make it more effective in this current COVID reality? Tonight, we'll be getting some valuable insight from a cross-section of both the national and local music community. So I hope there is some information shared tonight that is of value to you, everyone that's tuning in. Before I introduce our panel, I'd like to acknowledge that for us in Adelaide, we're meeting on the traditional country of the Kaurna people of the Adelaide Plains and pay respect to elders past and present. We recognise and respect their cultural heritage, beliefs and relationship with the land. We also acknowledge that they are of continuing importance to the Kaurna people living today. We are also extending the respect to our Aboriginal language groups and our other First Nations. Firstly, can we get a bit of a virtual applause for our stunning musical guest for tonight, Lachlan Turnock, who is more commonly known as Pink Fame. Adelaide producer and singer-songwriter Pink Fame is a prominent figure in South Australian creative scene, and his output showcases the young musician's developed mindset as both a producer and a lyricist. To date, his catalogue has generated waves around the globe with a combined 2 million plays across multiple platforms. 2020 is already looking quite busy for him with the release of single You Never Said, which came out in March. Was that Lockie? Was that March that came out?
Yeah.
And you've also got another one coming up. Is that correct?
Yes, cool body language. Super keen.
And what's that, June?
That's going to be late June, yes.
Ah, beautiful. Okay, cool. And how's that all looking so far?
Yeah, it's looking good. Everything's going well, even to do with COVID. We've been like working around it. So yeah, and body language and You Never Said it's going to be a part of an EP that's coming out later in August. And there's a whole release plan around that. And I'm really excited to share it with everybody, and I hope it gets a really good reception.
And you're working with GyroStream?
Yes. So I've been working with GyroStream PR and also as distribution. So the distribution side, if you know of him, his name's Andy. He takes care of that. And my PR side is Viv Malesh and her team. So yeah, that's been really cool to work with them. And yeah.
It's good. Well, I'm looking forward to that. So yeah, cool. All right. Well, let me introduce the rest of our panel. I'll start with our interstate guests who are joining us tonight. From Remote Control Records, we have Georgia Cooke. Georgia has worked on publicity and release campaigns for artists including Adele, Queens of the Stone Age, Courtney Barnett, Methyl Ethel, Aldous Harding, the XX, just names go on and on and on. There's a lot that you've done. Remote Control also represents some of the biggest international labels, including the Beggars Group, which has seminal labels 4AD, Matador, Rough Trade, XL Recordings. But in addition to that, you represent some pretty decent local catalogs, local labels, including Captured Tracks, Milk, Part-Time Records, and Boss Battle Recordings. Thank you very much for joining us, Georgia.
Thanks for having me.
How are you going in Melbourne over there?
Doing pretty well. It's very cold, but
yeah. And you're working from home still?
Yeah, working from home.
Ah, right. Okay, cool. Just like everyone then.
Yeah, exactly.
Next, we have Stacey Piggott. Stacey is an accomplished creative communications executive with 20 years experience across music, TV, crisis management events, and brands. Stacey spent 15 years running her own agency, Two Fish Out of Water, before merging with Secret Service PR in 2014. In March 2020, along with her team, she started Daydream Nation, Australia's freshest boutique full-service PR and marketing agency specialising in music, entertainment, digital strategy, and crisis management. Stacey also happens to be our only published author, having released Blow Your Own Trumpet, a musician's guide to publicity and airplay, just a couple of years ago. Thank you very much for joining us, Stacey. I think it's pretty nice to have our first author. How's that feel?
Feels good. I'm actually working on a revision at the moment, so I can take the MySpace references out of that.
But they were my favourite.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know. I didn't mind MySpace. It's probably indicative of what kind of band you are if you still remember your MySpace page. I don't know. It's probably getting to the point that it's a bit redundant, isn't it? You know.
It is. It's also, I miss the top 10 friends too.
That's my favorite part of
yeah,
MySpace. Yeah.
yeah. Well, yeah. Thank you very much for joining us, Stacey. It's great to have you. Also joining us is Uda Widanapathirana. Uda is an artist manager, creator, and publicist at Cooke. They work on the management teams of Gordy, Willaris Carr, and 66 Records, amongst others. At Dark Mofo, Tasmania's heralded Wintertime Festival, they form a part of the curatorial music team and program Night Mass. Their time in international music included PR campaigns for Caribou, Flying Lotus, Danny Brown, and Tycho, amongst others. In a day and age governed by identity, Uda Ravi is fascinated by the role of music as a vehicle for cultural accessibility. Thank you very much for joining us, Uda.
Thank you.
I mean, I guess the one thing that's probably not keeping you busy at the moment is the Dark Mofo stuff. How are you dealing with that at the moment?
I was so heartbroken when obviously everything fell apart, but look, it'll be back. I hope it will be back.
Well, yeah, I think we all hope it'll be back, but I think we all know it will be back as well. So
yeah, I was like I was really psyched for this year's program. I was just like, whoa, I have never done anything like this, and now no one will see it.
Well, no one will see it this year. No one will see it this year.
I guess we can just do a rehash of it, but I think we will do that. So.
Because it wasn't announced, right? You guys, it was.
No, we didn't announce it.
Yeah, the only thing was announced was Bon Iver.
Yeah. We were like 2 weeks away from announce, and then we were just like, nope, this isn't happening.
I think that's a really, just to completely butt in, but I think that's a really interesting part of the industry is the amount of cancellations and postponements and announcements and re-announcements that we have all seen, but it's actually so much of the behind the scenes and the planning and all the things that you're about to announce or you're working on that's just been paused or cancelled or delayed, and somewhat, you know, particularly for a group of people that operate behind the scenes, that can just be so tiring and exhausting and, you know, demotivating because you've done all of this stuff to get to a point, and then COVID just kind of paused everything, and that doesn't, you know, there's no acknowledgement of some of that stuff, you know, particularly from, you know, I guess government or, you know, things like that, where it's like, oh, that work isn't measurable to COVID right now. And that can be a really tough thing when you're trying to
I want you to hold that thought, Sam, because we're definitely going to cover that in this talk, because this is definitely something I want to cover, because I'm sure all of you have worked across events, so I want to know what it feels like to not be working on an event at the moment. So just hold that thought. As I introduce our one and only, well, not our one and only, but our local representative. We have Leigh from Against the Grain. Leigh is a founder and owner of Against the Grain. Leigh is based in Adelaide and is a leading arts, entertainment, and lifestyle communication professional with over a decade of experience working on local, national, and international projects. Leigh has worked with some great names across a variety of sectors, including international music and arts festivals like WOMAD, leading environmentalists, international identities, major film festivals, leading brands, and local and international musicians. Leigh, you've done a lot. Thank you very much for joining us, and thanks for being our local PR person. How are you going?
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I mean, it's good to get a local perspective on how PR works, because there's not a lot of Adelaideans representing promotions.
There's not a lot of us. There is a few. There's a pocket, a nice handful, and the people who are here are doing it really, really well. But there is more. We need more publicists and communication professionals in the arts and music sector, especially the music sector here in Adelaide.
Well, it's nice. You've got a bit of a monopoly on it.
Oh, it's worked my charm so far, but it's time to expand and keep growing.
Well, yeah. Well, hopefully that's what we can do. We can kind of get some more publicists in the mix.
Exactly.
Well, now I'd like to start the conversation. I'm going to hand over to my colleague, Sian, and she's going to get things started. So, Sian, if you would.
Thanks, Joel. So I wanted to kind of kick off the conversation. Obviously, you know, we know a little bit about what you guys do and, you know, general PR, and we'll probably delve into that a little bit more later. But I think something that I always find really interesting, that's something to really think about is about kind of the consumer interaction with PR and publicity, and how they're kind of what's capturing their eye. And as you know, a bunch of professionals that work with it, obviously you have knowledge and understanding of it a little bit more. So I'd be really interested to hear from each of you as to what captures your eye as a consumer when you see a good publicity spin or kind of something that really, you know, stands out to you, and what that's been, just from your own, whether or not it's in music or it's something else, you know, another brand or something, just to kind of converse as to what, you know, what's cutting through, you know, where there's so much noise out there, and particularly at this time when everyone's kind of on their screens or, you know, a little bit less distracted. So I'd love to hear from each of you as to kind of what's converting, and Lockie, as an artist as well, looking at other artists as what's kind of capturing your eye there. So maybe we'll hear from you first as to what's really cut through. Yeah, that'd be great.
Okay, sure. I think what I've noticed on a PR front, and somebody who's really stuck out to me like hard, is a guy called Nerve. He's a rapper based in Brisbane.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if everybody's familiar, but he, like, what he's doing during even just COVID or just before it, he's like really engaging with fans and like creating this really cool community that I've noticed that he's building. And he's been giving away like his gear, and he's got like a real brand where it says like, he wears like Nike utility wear. He like wears speed dealer glasses. Like he's like, he knows like he likes to joke, but he's also serious about what he's saying. He does a bunch of really cool like little freestyles. He did one out in front of the Sydney Opera House before A$AP Ferg did it. And he did another one recently. And yeah, I've just been really interested in how he's kind of, and he's been like on rotation a lot on Triple J. So he's clearly got a marketing plan. He's just been doing a really lot of cool things that I think not too many other artists are doing in Australia. I don't know every single one, and like obviously there's others doing it, but he's somebody who's really sticking out to me, and that I'm taking a lot of inspiration from. So yeah. Awesome.
That's really great. I think, you touched on a couple of things there in terms of branding and knowing your brand and kind of like really sticking to it. And I think that's something that is always really important with, I know, and probably PR can talk to is like, okay, what's your niche, you know, trying to pull put those dots together and really kind of steer the story when they're, you know, undertaking campaigns.
Yeah, all of his stuff feels like really well placed too. Whoever's like his PR, they're like doing a really good job.
Awesome. What about you, Uda?
What have I found interesting?
Yeah, what have you seen?
Well, I guess like in the context of branding, like whenever I see a campaign that actually reflects a specific artist or brand at whatever level, that's probably not what I find impressive. It's just like when I look at the background of whatever might be happening in that publicist's mind, they're not just like going far and wide, they're doing something that actually works for that particular artist. And yes, that is me putting my industry hat on, being like, I find it impressive. But I guess like, obviously we're like very oversaturated with live streams right now. And I guess it's like tiring to look at that from an industry point of view. But some consumers, depending on how it's positioned and where it's positioned, can still find it very interesting. One of the first streams, actually it was maybe the first stream that came out that got a lot of press attention, was from this band in Pennsylvania called Code Orange. I think they're on Roadrunner. And they did a live stream on the night that was meant to be their EP launch party. And it was the first day of lockdown, I think, in Philly. And they sort of, you know, obviously it was very high budget, but they like mashed their live performance that was in like, I think it was maybe at St. Vitus Bar in New York. And it was like interplay with like their live visuals, and it like kind of looked like a movie instead of just like a
cool.
not YouTube, like a webcam live stream. Like it was multicam. They had like live visuals that weren't just on stage, but like directly into the feed. And it was sort of like, going in between each other. And I thought it was just like a very, like, in the concept of content, it was very high quality content earlier on, which really, really cut through, because this was when everyone was so disorientated with like, oh my God, we're just going to be in a content haze, you know?
Yeah, I think that's a great point as well. I'm sure you've all had conversations about live streaming and how you feel about it and how much is going on and whether or not people should or shouldn't.
Well, are we reaching
Saturation?
Saturation point with live streaming? You know, Georgia, are you kind of steering any of your artists away from the live streaming aspect of their promo?
I think what we've been focusing on is if artists are keen to do live streams, that they're doing them really well. So they're making sure they have the right processes in place to do a live stream. I guess first things first, having a good internet connection. We've had, I think we've all seen artists who have been halfway through a song and then the internet's dropped down and the stream's ended. So we haven't necessarily been pushing people away from it, but making sure that they're planning really well when creating a live stream.
Because there is a lot that you're putting in the hands of the artist. You know, I mean, with a live performance, there's crew, there's a venue, there's all those things in place. But with a live stream, it's like, okay, we're really relying on that artist to kind of have it all in place and have their Wi-Fi good enough. I mean, Stacey, how do you kind of see it? Do you see it as kind of living beyond this COVID reality, or is live streaming here to stay?
I think it depends on the artist, to be honest. Like, to me, it's like live performances at radio or any kind of filmed online performance. Some of the artists that we work with, it's a beautiful thing. They sound great stripped back. They sound great with just an acoustic guitar. Other artists we work with, it would not work. It would sound terrible. And it would really take away from the energy that makes them really good. So I think it's up to the artist. If the artist feels that they can do it and they want to have that outlet, great. If, I think if there's a lot of stress around it and they feel uncomfortable with it, then it's not a good idea, like anything really. But I mean, for me personally, I feel a bit bad because I haven't really been tuning in to too many of the, live sessions. I don't know if I find it a little bit too, it's sort of reminding me what I'm missing out on, or it's just not the same. I don't know. I'm finding that I'm watching more old performances of actual shows with crowds than I am watching the more stripped back live performances that are happening at the moment. It's just, I sort of feel like I'm really missing the vibe. So I'm trying to get the vibe, with crowds as a part of it. That's just me though. I don't know.
Would you say, is there anything that's grabbed you when it comes to live streaming or anything particular at the moment? Because I know personally, I feel terrible, but yeah, I just don't vibe live streaming. I think there's something about it where I'm like, there's just too many notifications. And I've just kind of, if it's a one-off or it's something special, or I'll go back and watch things. But yeah, if it's live, I really want to I'll get in and support a little bit, but there's that degree of wanting people to not know that I'm only tapping in and then I'm tapping out. There's somewhat a little bit too much.
I think Uda said it really cool about the guys in Philly, how they did it. That's a really cool way of doing it.
Well, is it kind of, is it tailored for an acoustic artist? Lachlan, how do you feel about, trying to put together a live performance as an electronic artist?
It's kind of difficult because recently, I got asked to do one and we kind of didn't say yes to it because they didn't just want it acoustically done on a piano. They kind of wanted my live performance. Mm-hmm. And I was really searching. There's a thing you can get because we were just going to do it on my phone and the audio didn't sound that great, what I was doing. So we were trying to get this, I was trying to find this interface for a phone. Long story short, I didn't have enough time, and with COVID, I couldn't order it in by the time I wanted to perform, and I couldn't find it, so I ended up saying no. So I think as an electronic artist, it's kind of hard, and I'm glad, I'm not classically trained in anything, but I'm glad I can play the piano and do things, but I wouldn't say it's something that I'll do heaps of, if that makes sense. Yeah. I'll push it aside or say well. Yeah. Go on, sorry.
Sorry, I was just going to say, I just had a thought of, I think Vicar and Linda Bull are probably the only ones that I've seen that have floored me because their singing, is so out of this world, and their live sessions that they've been doing each Sunday have been incredible. But it is the thing that kind of does my head in a little bit is the constant bubbles of stuff going up on Facebook Live or Instagram Live of people liking in the comments, it is really hard to just focus on it without reading all of that or being distracted with them.
And the other element is it really all depends on how it kind of culminates into your PR campaign and what you want to achieve with streaming. Like if you're trying to replace an actual live gig with streaming to expand your audience, especially in this day and age when there are so many live streams going on, it might not be a practical opportunity. But if you're looking at making sure that you're continuing to engage with your current audience so they don't forget you're there and it's about making sure that connection is continuously going, then I think streaming is a good idea as long as it's practical, affordable is the other part, and also manageable on an artist level and part of any strategy you kind of put together.
I think that's a great point, Leigh. Like doing a live stream just because you feel like everyone's doing a live stream is not necessarily the right thing for you as an artist. And I think that, you know, that's for everything. Like just because another artist is doing something, or, you know, you should never kind of follow that format just because. There should, you know, it's a strategy behind it. It's about the audience. It's about, you know, what are you trying to get out of it? Are you trying to, you know, in any kind of PR campaign, you're trying to achieve certain things. And usually it's about building your audience or getting in front of something or achieving a certain goal. And kind of, I think that comes down to knowing your brand and then being able to tell your story. And so I think when you guys are working with artists, do you find that there's kind of a point in which that you can kind of tell that they're not ready for PR if they don't know their brand? Is that something that you would all kind of look at? And is that kind of a barrier of entry for artists to PR? They kind of need to know a little bit about their brand. And obviously that kind of depends on each of you having different experiences and different kind of levels of entry. Like I guess with label PR, it's like they're already signed. So that's kind of, you've got to kind of do the PR for it. But, you know, I'd love to hear, particularly Stacey, I'm guessing you're taking on stuff individually as well. And, you know, you've been doing it for a long time. So I can imagine that you potentially don't get, you know, super entry level artists kind of knocking at the door as much.
Yeah, we get loads. I mean, that's why I ended up doing that book, because they're sort of not at the point of really needing a company like ours for the cost. It's not going to, the cost that it's going to cost them for us to do a campaign is not going to be worthwhile to what they'll get back at that point in their career. But I think for me, young artists, like I really kind of loathe media training and, you know, sharpening people. I think that as a music fan, one of the things I love the most is going back into the archives of bands and artists that I love and looking at their interviews from when they very first started and when they're very nervous and they don't know how to articulate, and, you know, their clothes are really wild because they haven't been styled and they haven't thought about it. That to me, as a fan, I love that. And I hate when I see, you know, really great bands and then you can tell that, you know, an A&R person has kind of scrubbed out all the cool things about them
Stacey,
too early or haven't. You know,
how many conversations have you had with labels that have suggested we get some media training for this artist?
I do it, and I make sure that it's just me and the artist. And then when we sit there, my sort of media training that I do is like, okay, let's sit down and work out what your values are. So when you have a clear list of your values, it's very easy to make decisions, because if you've got a list of values and a list of goals, every decision you make is really easy to decide on, because you can go back and see whether that is going to get you closer to those goals and it's going to align with those values, or if it's going to be completely off track. So I find those two things with young artists are really helpful. I find if the artist is in any way political, or they're taking a stand on something, or they have a strong opinion on something, as long as they have, you know, well thought out short responses so that they can't be edited or, you know, misquoted, as long as they're educated on why they feel that way, but also why they are disagreeing with, I think, you know, what they're disagreeing with. That's really important to me, to make sure that if you're taking a stand on something, you also are really educated on the aspect that you disagree with, and you're educated on the people's opinions that you disagree with, so that people can't rattle you or shake you when you get to that point. But aside from that, I think, you know, young artists, will develop their own brand and it will change. You know, they could be really hardcore political and then they'll soften. They could go out quite soft and then end up being a lot more political. They might start off as a folk band that, you know, goes into something that is a little bit more electronic. And I think when you get artists that develop over that period of time, it's actually really exciting to see the different, you know, incarnations that they take. Like I look at someone like Gareth Lydiard, who, you know, I've worked with Gaz and Fee in Drones. I do his solo stuff and now I'm working with them in TFS. And they're all very different entities by the same artist. And I think, you know, being stuck to a particular brand or, you know, being told how you should be is really dangerous. And, you know, those guys, like we started working with them and a lot of people were saying to me with the Drones, you know, they need radio edits, they need radio edits. And I was like, no, they don't. The songs are great. Let's see if we can bring people to you. And they had songs on, you know, radio that were 7 minutes long, 11 minutes long. And, you know, became a really successful band out of that. So I think I'm more about enhancing the artist and just making sure that they're educated and prepared more so than developing their brand. I think the brand is something that comes as a result of all of the education and the vibe and the talent and the creativity. And our job, I think, as publicists and marketers is to capture that essence and bring people to it, not remold them to fit something that is already out there. That's just me though.
No. Well, you mentioned there are artists that have strong opinions and, you know, strong beliefs. And given whether we're in the environment where they can voice those strong opinions and strong beliefs at will, how do you go about managing or ensuring that what they're saying is not going to be detrimental? You know, is that something that as a PR person, when it comes to managing or an artist campaign, is there something that you all have to kind of be really vigilant about? You know, essentially they can say whatever they want now, and it's on Instagram, it's on Twitter. How much of it is it a priority to kind of manage that for you all?
I mean, for me, it's an education thing, and it's about preparing that artist, because there's some pretty bad ramifications that come with very minor missteps, you know, on an artist's mental health. Internet is brutal. And I think as publicists, it's up to us to keep a step ahead of that. And if there is anything that is controversial or that might be received in a negative way, I always make sure, and I don't know if anyone else does this, but I always go through and do like key messages, like I do for festivals. I'll do key messages with artists around whatever topics are, you know, prevalent in their music. And I will literally think in a way and ask questions that, you know, the most douche-lord person would ask, you know, in media, and the most inappropriate questions, so that the artist can think about their answer. I get the artist to answer the questions, and then I'll come back and go through it with them and say, okay, this could be problematic because of these reasons, or this, you haven't really thought this through, or, you know, let's go a little bit deeper into this area so you've got a more solid question, so that they're doing it at a time when they're calm and when they're clear, and they don't have to panic or rush something out and respond. I've been in that situation a couple of times where, I mean, Mojo Juju was a great example, where her incredible song a couple of years ago, Native Tongue, went out and copped a pretty, you know, pretty off review from a music publication. And instead of responding straight away, you know, I said to her, just sit with it. Sit with the response until you're really comfortable, because there was a gamut of emotions that came as a result of that. It had blown up everywhere else. A lot of other people had opinions on it. And her emotions went from, you know, total shock to sadness to anger to, you know, more calm, considered response. And in the end, it was 4 days later when she responded, and her response was incredible. It was so well thought out. It was so intelligent and calm and level. It just sort of, you know, put her on the next level, I think, with people who read it out there. So there's, yeah, I think to be prepared, is I don't think you can be too prepared with that sort of stuff. When you get asked questions and you're under stress in interviews, or you're caught on the spot, if you've already thought through your answer and you've already run through it on paper and in your head, it just comes across a bit more articulate than if you're saying like I do all the time. So, yeah.
Anyone else have some thoughts on that?
Does anybody else want to go?
I think just like adding on to what Stacey and Leigh were saying earlier about just staying to your goals, like whatever goals that artist has, whether they're like a outspoken artist or political, or whether they're just like a normal artist, whether that message fits into those goals is like just constantly reminding them of that. Like you can be super political and activist and whatever, but like that messaging is not going to have any use unless it's going to play to your goals of where you want to be as a musician. Maybe those two things are inextricably linked, but you still need to play both of them at the same time. Like send out the right messages at the right time in order for it to be effective. So like if like an artist is like, you know, just saying whatever they want when they want it, doesn't have to be political or doesn't have to be regarding anything, just that is not necessarily, it's not structured and it's not, it doesn't really serve the purposes of what they might want to be doing as a musician.
And just one point there, and considering this is for like industry people, when you're looking or researching or interviewing potential new publicists for your project, this is a really good reason as to why it's really important to have a solid foundation and relationship with your publicist, because I will, and I assume everybody else here will, that if artists will say things that maybe they shouldn't say and they'll put things up on Facebook and Instagram, it's inevitable. It happens every now and then. But as a publicist, I will call an artist out and say, hey, that wasn't great, that wasn't ideal, but this is how we work with it. And when you go back and have those conversations, it's really important for the artist to know it's not a publicist having a go at you or your morals or your goals. It's just saying, hey, there was a better way of approaching this. Let's look at what you said and how we can reframe it and move forward. And that's where a lot of continuity between the two work parties can really kind of create a lot of dividends later down the track, when you can voice your opinions, but you can do it constructively. And kind of hopefully once you work with a publicist and your team around you, being the manager and everybody else, and define those goals and your values and you put it out there, you can really make a bigger impact. So it's all from an artist point of view, it can come down to working within your team and making sure that there is really good communication across everybody, I think.
Well, Georgia, given you're working across multiple artists as a label publicist, how do you go about differentiating between or curtailing your campaign to different styles of music? I mean, that must be something that's difficult to juggle.
Yeah, I think every campaign is different because you have to think about who the band want as their audience, and you kind of frame it from that. So talking with the artist or the band, seeing where they want to be, where they want their audience to be, where they want to be positioned, and then figuring out who those media champions are that will connect the artist to that audience. So I think, yeah, we kind of stem all our campaigns from first just working out who the artist wants to connect to, and then figure out the best media outlets and the best journalists and best radio presenters from that.
I think that feeds back kind of to a point that Stacey made about, seeing an artist kind of grow and discover themselves, and, eventually becomes a brand. But I think some artists are, they hear the word brand and marketing and PR, and they kind of assume they have to be a certain way or they've got to fit in a certain place. And sometimes there's a fear of being kind of authentic, or they're like, oh, we've got to, I've had a number of conversations, particularly, and I'm sure it's come up in all kind of areas for all of you at some point about, how do I get on Triple J, and kind of whether or not they're making music or they're following something, or they've got to have a political view for something, or they've got to, be friends with this person or do this. And that inauthenticity will always shine through. So, I think one of the biggest things for me is that I would say to an artist that, if your music's good and you're authentic, and then kind of that can really steer your brand. Like, as in, don't be you know, if you've got people that are supportive of your music, but they don't fit your idea of who your fans are, that's maybe on you. That's an, you know, something that you need to research about where your fans are or what your music is, rather than, you know, rather than it not reaching the fans, maybe you need to reassess how you're reaching people or what your messaging is.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting, by the way, Sian, because I just want to touch on a quick point more from an artist point of view, because all you guys are like really touching on really important points that as a younger artist, I definitely miss and I definitely did not understand. And look, I'm still learning today. You know, I'm not like some artist who's been here for 30 years, but I think what was a big thing for me, and I noticed like at the start, I'd always focus on other people and what they were doing, and it would stress me out that other artists were successful and I wasn't. And I think like I'd upload something to say Triple J on Earth and they wouldn't review it and it'd make me all sad and I'd be like, oh. But I think what's important and what I did is I kind of took a step back. I realized who I was, and kind of like you were saying, Sian, and everybody kind of has touched on, I think just knowing your brand, and this is me speaking directly to any artist watching this, know your brand, know who you are, because it's not hard, and nobody can do the better you, only you can do you. So stay true to who you are, and you'll just attract like-minded people that kind of gravitate towards you and things just start to work out in the end, you know, and as you start to build it. Yeah.
Well, that raises a good point, because, you know, knowing who you are is essential, because you need to be able to feed that information to whoever's working with you as a publicist. So, I mean, how much is it intuition for you people, if you as a publicist, and how much are you really reliant on the information that is fed to you to help build a bit of a story for the artist that you're promoting?
I just want to, you mean like, how do you develop like the story?
How do you develop the story? How do you develop the brand?
Yeah, so in regards to developing the brand, or how I would not help an artist, but like, I guess point the artist in the right direction. I only actually just did this at the start of the week, but I was talking to an artist, and you know, they're about to launch and they're trying to figure out like how to position themselves and how to like launch their debut music, et cetera, et cetera. And what I said to them was like, look through your, because you know how when you like something on Instagram, you can actually look through every single thing that you've liked. And I was just like, look at all of that stuff, and then whatever similarities you see, put it on a Pinterest and like make like a little mood board out of it, and that will tell you who you are, because those are the things that you like, those are the things that you like fashion-wise. You might be liking some music stuff, and that's just like a really like, you know, this is like for an artist who hasn't, you know, played live before. This is for an artist that hasn't done the rounds of any form of live music or anything before. So that was the first, I think, yeah, I guess the first time that I've actually been like, okay, we're drawing this brand up from scratch. There are things that you like. There are things that are inherently about you that are a brand, but we just haven't carved out what they are. So let's start off with your likes in terms of like, what sort of things do you follow? What sort of like, you know, where...
Yeah, that's a really good idea, by the way.
Et cetera. So that is just like I don't know, an idea that I had this week that has worked well.
You know, that raises a good point, because, you know, you've got I mean, there's an element of working with a younger artist or an emerging artist. They're utilizing social media platforms. They're aware of they're probably teaching you how to use them, some of them.
Mm-hmm.
But how do you navigate, you know, probably an artist that's not been using those platforms that well, and you know, do you force them to kind of utilize them? Is there older artists that, you know, you have to kind of educate and make them aware of how people are consuming music these days? I mean, have you any of you had kind of issues with artists that were so resistant to embracing new platforms?
I think that that artist who might be older, that might not want to, you know, take up like new social medias, you need to find out where their audience is currently, and if their audience aren't on Instagram or Snapchat or anything, maybe they're using Facebook in a very basic way or something like that. So maybe they're still using mailing lists. You know, maybe they have a very successful mailing list where they do all their pre-orders through, and they don't even need to, you know, have any fancy music.ly stores or anything like that. So I think understanding like how people have followed them, and then seeing, okay, are less people engaging with us now as they did back then? On what platforms have they been dropping off? And then sort of make the decision from there whether like you know, have they moved from emails to Instagram or whatever, if that makes any sense. Just seeing where your audience lives and how they interact with, like, I don't know, music.
Definitely. I think that's one of my favorite parts of the industry is stats from a social engagement, just to kind of understand how people are engaging with your content. And, you know, it can't all be based around that, but it gives you a really good indication as to, you know, if people are responding to stuff, if they're liking, if they're sharing, or if, you know, if they're following or unfollowing at a certain time, you know, you can kind of pinpoint that. And, you know, that's not the whole picture, but it can be really great, I guess. I know as a manager, that's something that I look at just to be able to understand it. But I'd love to hear, is that something that from a PR perspective that you guys really look at, or is it kind of, is what's the other stuff? What do you want from an artist when you're starting to work with them to understand kind of their, you know, their foundation when you're building from a PR kind of avenue? In terms of like from label, Georgia, what would you want to know about an artist when they're coming on board and you're kind of building out a campaign for them?
Yeah, so I guess kind of similar to what Uda said, finding out who they are really, where they want to be, and kind of starting to build things from there. One thing I always ask in terms of a press campaign is, what radio stations and music publications do you listen to yourself? Because generally they're probably the first places to target, because if you gel with the music that is being pushed across there, it probably is going to work. But yeah, from also, I guess the other things in terms of like social media, I guess the main thing in terms of different channels is making sure that whatever you do decide to focus on, you're just consistent and that you're authentic too. There's no point going crazy and posting, you know, heaps during an EP release and then not posting for 6 months after that.
I think that's a great point, because the posting and the schedule of posting is something that everyone has a different opinion on. Like artists often are like, oh, I've got to post now, or, you know, they'll kind of do that where they've got a bit of momentum and then it will drop off. And, you know, from an algorithmic perspective, that can also really throw things out as well, you know. Yeah, algorithms change all the time anyway, so it's hard to know, but just that kind of like, I heard a theory one day of like post one thing on Instagram and then post something like 2 hours later, and the second post is the one that you want everyone to focus on. And then, you know, on Facebook, it's a different thing, and you can't include links and you can't do this and that. So it's, you know, how do you guys keep up with that? And then, you know, obviously that's more of a marketing side of things, but I feel like a lot of artists don't necessarily always know the two different sides, you know, that there's marketing and there's PR, and that you probably have to do a bit of both when you're first starting out. How do you kind of communicate that to artists, or what do you expect an artist to be communicating to you when you're working with them? Leigh, I'd love to hear kind of, obviously working from events, but then also working directly with artists. How does that kind of change, and are your expectations kind of similar in what information you grab from people?
They're all very similar, but like working with festivals to bands is a completely separate ballgame altogether. Again, like you were talking about social media and how you kind of keep up with trends and what works and what doesn't work. And the obvious answer to that is just read and search the blogs and everything else and listen to everyone, and everyone has a different opinion, and then you run around in circles and don't know, and end up back where you started. But the best thing about social media these days is there's stats in the back end. When you turn your band page into a business page, you can see where people are listening, when they're listening, what they're engaging with. And it's the most basic tool that any band can use, and you don't need to have a PR or marketing person to do it. It's all accessible. You can work out when your audience is engaging with you, what they're doing. Are they listening to your music? Are they clicking through the streams or articles, or are they clicking through to Spotify? And you can use those tools to really kind of delve down into who your audience is on an online platform, and then work that to make a broader demographic for who your audience might be. And then I suppose the other part is making sure it works out into where your branding is, and does your audience match up to your branding ideals? And if not, go back to the drawing board and work out where you're missing and how you can kind of work it from there. so there's like 3 or 4 different questions in that one.
Yeah,
And so I
sorry.
kind of got a bit lost on this. The second part was about what kind of details you want.
Yeah. So in terms of like, obviously stats are great, but when you're working with someone, yeah, you kind of want all that info. And then is there kind of anything specifically also outside of that you want to know that you can then build on? Kind of like, is it about kind of grooming, you know, like teaching people what they need to be looking for as well?
Well, going back to George's point, like she was talking about the idea, like what station or what do they read as key elements, because that's probably the first place they want to be heard or read about themselves, but also what they do. Like from a publicist's point of view, we can get bands into tone deaf or the music or double J or triple J. It's kind of what we do. But I find the biggest hits, the more rewarding hits, are the ones where you hit surf magazines up, or maybe a horticulturalist magazine, and you get that big profile piece that stretches a couple pages, and it actually hits a new audience. So it's expanding an artist's audience, but it also kind of reflects positively on the personality and then for the brand of the artist and where it hits. So it's really, well, I try to get to know it in my artists as much as I can. Do they go surfing on the weekend? Do they like chai tea? Do they run on the weekend? What kind of joggers do they use? And kind of get a whole snapshot, like, and really work out what are the different angles that you can utilize and take from an artist to make them stand out in what is a shrinking media market, but also a mass media market where there is so much noise across social media and publicity and radio, and it is hard to cut through. But if you can find that little bit of information, I always tell my clients there is nothing like a good bit of stupid information. Something that you think is completely neglected, it's not relevant. But to me as a publicist, you can kind of use it and grow on it. And some of the best ideas I've ever had come from silly, crazy little ideas. I can't think of one off the top of my head, but conversation with publicists and information.
And the other thing that I was kind of covering that I'd love to hear kind of anyone's thoughts on is that differentiation of marketing to PR, and kind of has that line been blurred a little bit more as, you know, social media has become more of a PR outlet, and kind of, or has it been more kind of you've had to educate people? Yeah, what's kind of everyone's take on that line being a bit blurred?
They work in unison. You got to be across your social media, you got to be across your marketing, you got to be across your PR. PR and marketing go hand in hand. Spending and advertising and PR works together. Spending on Facebook is a good tool, and then leveraging the marketing across all the different platforms that you use. So when you're talking PR, you are talking marketing, and when you're talking marketing, you are talking PR. It all kind of encapsulates in one big bubble for me.
I think that if
I agree with that.
to be like, oh, sorry, you go.
No, go for it. Go for it. It's my fault.
I was just going to say, I think all the platforms, all the socials platforms have tutorials on how to use them and how to get the best out of them. I think it's really worth artists spending the time to do those tutorials, Google, you know, step-by-steps. If you Google like how to get metrics on Facebook or how does Facebook work, there's hundreds of little videos you can watch to educate yourself, because that'll save a lot of money. Once you know how those things work and how you can maximize them, you can save yourself having to pay someone else to do that. And you can make sure that whatever you're posting is actually getting you the outcome. One thing I noticed with Facebook is, you know, you can have a post that might have 1,000 likes on it, but when you go into the back end, it hasn't actually translated into anything, any sales of tickets or any sales of albums or any kind of click-through streaming services. Another post might only have 300 likes on it, but the conversion is huge at the back end. So you need to work out what content is giving you vanity metrics and what content is giving you actual sales. You know, when you get into that back end, you know how to read all of that, which is it's pretty easy because they kind of do it for you. There's a lot of tools there that you can utilize to save yourself a lot of money and make sure that you're putting all of your energy into the right channels.
And is that something, oh, sorry, Joe.
Nana, you go.
I was just going to say, in terms of, you know, those younger artists who are thinking that they have to get PR on board, kind of, do you think kind of first step, just like understand those platforms and kind of get as much knowledge, like it's all available online. is that kind of, you know, if someone came to you and they're really green and they're not kind of ready, or they don't have the money, or, you know, certain other things, is just educate yourself as much as possible?
Yeah, I think if you're super green and not 100% sure if you need a publicist, first thing to do is just to have a look at the Australian media landscape and see what sort of outlets exist. Community radio is an amazing thing we have in Australia. Each state has different radio stations which are comprised of volunteers who are curating shows. If you don't have the budget to hire a publicist, there are some really great resources like AMRAP, which allow you to service your music to community radio across the nation. Yeah, I think there are definitely some things you can look at and figure out, okay, what can I do myself, and at what point do I need to hire someone to get me to the next level of media coverage?
And I would also suggest give it a go yourself. Be it PR or marketing or management or any part of the industry. If you're a young band and you think you want to publicist, go and do your own bit of PR. So one, that'll give you the understanding what PR is, but when you meet with a publicist to hire them, you actually know what they're talking about and you understand it a bit more. It gives you that greater sense of understanding and what you actually want from a publicist.
100%.
One thing I always do with young bands, because we get a lot, you know, asking and they're not ready, but they're so overwhelmed because when they're thinking about doing their own PR, they're immediately thinking about Triple J, they're immediately thinking about Rolling Stone, they're immediately thinking about NME, and it seems way too big and way too, you know, full on to take on themselves. So I always tell them to look at their PR like an onion and build the layers out. So start really small, really local. So if you live in a local regional town, go to your local radio station, see what entertainment outlets are in your town who can support you with that local angle. Then go to the closest towns around you and basically just build your onion layers out, you know, so that you're looking at your state. I think whoever, you know, wherever you are, if you're outside of Victoria, when you're building that onion, the next state you go to should be Victoria, and you should start in Melbourne because there's so many outlets down there who will support you with new and young bands. And then, you know, go to the major cities and start looking at it with lists and goals with those smaller localized outlets first. And as you get used to talking to those guys who are not as, you know, scary or as out of reach as something like Triple J, you'll get more confident. And then by the time you get to a Triple J or an NME or a Rolling Stone, you've sort of probably been beaten and not care anymore, like we are. Or you'll be more confident to get to that point without it being, you know, too dramatic. But I think when you start thinking of the landscape and going straight to the, you know, the top tiers, it's really overwhelming to even want to pick up the phone or email or whatever. Yeah.
Well, you are starting to cover some important points and, you know, starting to dissect exactly what a publicist does. So for those uninformed, I mean, if I'm a new artist, what would you suggest about as far as servicing your own stuff to radio stations? What's the process there? You know, Georgia?
So I guess, yeah, I really love the onion analogy. I'm totally going to.
It's good. I think we're all going to use it. I think from every industry development meeting I have from this point on, it will be starting with the onion. So thank you, Stacey. I appreciate that. Sorry, Georgia.
Is that in that's in the new update?
Oh,
Yeah,
that's in the old one. Right. I've been using that for years.
Sorry, Georgia, off you go. Sorry.
Oh, all good. I guess, yeah, the main things, if you've gone and you've looked at the radio stations you want to target, you've figured out those people in your local area, there are some really basic things. So when you're servicing a song, send a link. Don't send the actual file itself in the email. Mm-hmm. It clogs people's inboxes. They don't want to download a file. You can send them something that they can stream easily and then download like a Dropbox link. Much, much easier.
What about CDs? Should they be sending a CD?
Probably not during these COVID times, but to be honest, most presenters are much happier having digital and not having CDs. There are a couple of odd presenters here and there who still like it, an old school thing, but it's very, very rare.
That's a really good point, though, with regards to sending conventional kind of parcels these days. You know, it's got the nature of COVID now, and what that kind of means is, yeah, it's changed. It's going to change a lot. You know, I mean, a lot of people aren't kind of sending snail mail kind of things, but you know, it does change things dramatically. You know.
Yeah, especially as a lot of radio presenters are broadcasting from home, so sending anything to a station is just going to sit in a mailbox for a long time. Yeah, also including some basic information about yourself, who you are, where you're from, what the song's about. If you have any gigs coming up, probably not relevant right now, but any bits of information that, you know, broadcasters can use if they like your song and want to play it on air. They're kind of the key things.
Yeah, what I've kind of done with this as well, from my perspective, is like a lot of the time when I was first starting out my music, I mean, the dream is always bigger radio stations, no matter what they are, you know, as in like I'm talking in radio's retrospect. I kind of started out on a thing here in Adelaide called Fresh FM, and I really just built some relationships. So like I used to email them and they wouldn't get back, kind of that same old scenario, like of a lot of artists have that issue and they kind of get upset, and that's totally acceptable because you're green, you send something, somebody doesn't get back, it feels like it hurts because you put a lot of time and effort in, but they're also busy. Anyway, long story short, I noticed a lot of the times that I've either been played, even on Triple J, I've had a relationship with the presenter and some of the team associated with that. And the way I got my foot in the door in my community radio station in Adelaide was having a friendship with a lady called Carolyn Tucker. And she did a night on Monday night. It was that Monday night. It wasn't in like prime time, but she did a thing on Monday night, and it allowed me to go in and have like an interview, experience the whole thing of talking, getting my music out there. And yeah, the whole onion thing, the whole onion layer, that was my first little onion layer. And then it's just been broadening out and out and out and out. And yeah, I just thought I'd add that in for people seeking like to get radio play and those type of things.
I think it's a good point. I think the other thing is that I don't think people really realize how much work it takes to get that vibe. They look at artists and think that they, you know, just service a song Triple J and it got picked up on high rotation and all of a sudden they're massive. When you actually dig deep into it, they've been working for a long time and, you know, to build a buzz in every tiny little corner. And if you look at community radio websites, they will have all of that information. The best thing to do is to go to the community radio websites, look at the, you know, contacts on the contacts pages. It usually says how they like to be serviced, who you can service. And then I look at the radio program platform and it'll tell you who, you know, usually give you contacts for each show as well. So you can see the playlist, what they're playing. You know, there's no point servicing a death metal track to a hip hop presenter for a hip hop show. They just won't respond, and you know that's crazy anyway. But that will give you a really good. It's sort of it's all laid out. It's kind of easy now because of the internet. It's just time consuming, so you have to commit to the time to actually do that. There's no fast way. Even, you know, we have junior staff come in. Every time I get a new staff member in our company, I always make them start with radio, because there is no way, it's no cookie cutter way of servicing radio or building an artist's career at radio. And I think it's the best way to learn, by contacting, looking at the programming, looking at what radio stations do, what opportunities are there for interviews and live performances, and, you know, all the different facets of it. It just takes a lot of time, but it's all there at your fingertips now.
Well, you know, you raise a kind of pretty good question, pretty good point, because, you know, a lot of artists fail to differentiate the difference between making something available online and releasing something. I think there's a misconception that just because it's available online means it's released, and I think a lot of artists need to kind of understand that. But on that, with regards to DSPs, is it the kind of similar process as servicing to radio? Is it are you servicing to curators of playlists, or are you servicing, just doing a broad service? Like how do you approach it from a label or as a manager or as a PR? Georgia, how did you go about it?
As in servicing to
DSPs and Spotify and what?
Yeah, so I guess it differs depending on who is your distributor. Generally, the distributor will pitch a song for you. But there are some cool things you can do just on your end as an artist or an artist manager. You can access your own account and go into your Spotify for artists, and then update your account so that it's up to date. It's got a press image, it's got a bio, it's got some information about you, so people who do land upon your song can click and learn more about who you are. And it also lets you connect your own playlists up there, so you can have a playlist of a bunch of different artists who you really love and connect that to your profile so other people can listen. But generally, in terms of pitching to DSPs, your distributor generally does that.
Is there any do's and don'ts with regards to your images, or when it comes to doing your profiles? I mean, is there any kind of information that kind of needs to be shared with a lot of artists before they're kind of pitching or getting stuff pitched? Uda?
I think that a lot of the stuff on banners, or making things look nice, usually your distributor, or you'd be able to find on Spotify what the best practices are, or whatever DSP will be able to provide you what resolution or what resolution or file format they might need for that. But in the context of simply pitching for an emerging artist, pitching through the back end of Spotify, or you might be able to email the artist coordinator, just giving them a heads up that the release is coming out. I doubt that you will get, let's not say that, but you probably won't get a response because they deal with a lot of emails, but they do look at them, and they do keep note of them. And also outside of Spotify editorial playlists, there's a lot of other third-party playlists. Maybe they come from blogs that you might be following. Maybe they might come from DJs that you might like, and they're making them on Spotify, and you might just send it to that DJ and they include it on their playlist. There's a whole bunch of other playlists that aren't Spotify editorial playlists aren't necessarily, or editorial playlists are not necessarily the only place you need to be pitching, because it's actually the weirdest thing to pitch for. So when you're starting from the ground up, it sort of makes sense to if someone has a playlist, send it to them. If not, a group of friends are doing something that's gaining some steam, send it to them.
Yeah, and also an interesting thing is I talked to an artist recently. I'm no manager or anything, so let's make that clear. But I talked to an artist and I gave her a bit of advice, and I noticed what she was doing was just releasing a song without any release plan. So even what you just said, Uda, with the playlisting and all that, it's a good idea to hit up to have a release plan, even if it's just a month, of people to actually contact pre this, so you have all things in place ready to go. So when it gets on playlist, once it's released, and you might have a premiere 5 or 2 or 3 days before it on a radio station in your community. Yeah, I just thought that I'd add that in as a good idea to think about, not just releasing it and then chucking it to them.
And I think, talking about the release plan, Joel and I get asked quite regularly. We have, as the industry development team, we have meetings with artists who are trying to get their music out there or understanding, and often they're having a meeting with us a week or 2 weeks before their song's coming out, and they're asking at that point, how do we get this song heard? How do I do publicity? Should I get a publicist? And I think that often I have provided information about being let's maybe on the next release, this is maybe what you could do. You need to have a lead in time. I prefer to have kind of minimum 6 weeks out from a release, but that's kind of, a minimum, and I've worked at much less, but ideally I'd like to have more. Is that kind of, is there a minimum, particularly, when you're looking at certain things, I guess when you're thinking about print media, that's got a way longer lead time, and when you're talking about album releases, that kind of changes the game. What would you say, if an artist comes to you for a single or for a full-length record, how much lead time do you want for everything? Particularly, Stacey, I'd love to hear your thoughts, because you're working on some really large campaigns and some big media internationally as well. So
I mean, it depends. It depends on the artist. You know, usually the bigger the artist, the less time they'll give you, and the more they'll just say, sort it out. And also the more it's likely that media will just pick up on it and run with it and make space for it as well, because it's kind of in their benefit to have an artist that is that big.
Yeah.
And it depends on how good the song is, depends on how good the clip is. If it's a really amazing clip, that again is going to go viral and get picked up pretty quickly, then the timeline is not as concerning as if it's going to be a struggle that needs to be pitched and repitched and repitched. Usually with singles, we like about 2 weeks so that we can pitch premieres and you know, give people a couple of days to have a think about it and look at it and then come back to us. Then if they don't want it, we can pitch it to somebody like another outlet. And then albums, probably 2 months we like to have, just so we can sit down and plan it properly. And again, like, it depends who the artist is and what they actually want out of the campaign as well. You know, some artists would want a really solid, you know, they want reviews in GQ and Vogue and Elle magazine, and they want to do stuff in, you know, quarterly journals and that kind of stuff. So they'll give us a lot longer lead-in time. Other people don't care. They just want it on radio because they're touring or because they don't want to hold it any longer. And those kind of glossy magazines are a little bit irrelevant to their audience. Yeah, it really depends. I mean, and it also depends on our workload too. You know, if we have artists coming to us, you know, over summer, the longer the lead-in time, the better, because, you know, pre this situation when media was really banked up with summer festivals and international touring, and we, you know, our books are banked up with summer festivals and international touring, it makes it really hard to get the space for, you know, album campaigns and singles that we don't have a good solid lead-in time for. And, you know, that back end of the year, people just seem tired and shitty, so it's harder to get people excited. So there's so many different variables. I think if you're a young artist, you should give yourself at least a month lead-in time. And I'd be talking to a publicist probably, you know, 2 or 3 months before that to get on their books, because most, you know, a lot of publicists who are good are going to be booked up months in advance and are not going to have the space to take you on at such short notice as well. Even if they really, you know, I've had artists that I'm really huge fans of their music, but there's just no way that I could take on any more work at that point. So.
Definitely. And just to clarify, on a 2 week, like 2 weeks with a single, you want everything ready at that point. That's like them coming to you. It's already uploaded to DSPs. They've got their videos sorted, their press shots, you know, all of that stuff. So it's important for artists to kind of know that. And that's why it's kind of, you know, starting that little bit earlier and making sure it's all ready, because they need to come to you with everything set to go so you can be effective on those campaigns. For sure. Joel, I was going to throw it to you because I just completely forgot what I was going to ask next. Actually, it was on premieres. I wanted to chat about the place of premieres in the media landscape at this point of time. I'd love to, if anyone's got any thoughts on it or had kind of anything. I think, Uda, it would be great to hear from you from obviously a publicist but a manager perspective. I think
the world of online premieres is quite dead. Quite dead unless you have like a international publication or international publicist. I love a good radio premiere. I love radio more now than I did before. I've always loved radio, but the community radio specifically, big place in my heart for community radio at this current moment in time. So I feel like premieres, not even premieres, but just giving them first plays, or like giving them that first bit of attention. Maybe you can piece it together with a small phone-in interview or something like that. But especially like in the emerging stage, I feel like it's not even like, you know, it's not even about like getting extra exposure. Like when you are giving like first play ops and you know, those early interview ops to community radio and everything like that, and you're just developing, you're really like firming up your relationships with people in your community. I think that's really important. And yeah, I stand for that.
Awesome. And that goes back to, what Stacey was saying, that lead time, particularly when you are newer, it might take a little bit longer to kind of seed it out and get someone to pick it up. So the earlier that you're chatting with your publicist, the publicist can kind of be like, okay, cool. Well, I want you know, you can set those deadlines based on your own, you know, workload, or kind of, you know, you're like, great, I love this, but these people have never heard of this artist before, so I'm going to have to, you know, keep working at it and keep following up. So just kind of understanding how to best help your publicist as an artist, I think that's really important. It would be great to hear from you, Lockie, as to kind of like from an artist perspective, learning that, and then how that's kind of maybe developed as you've worked more and more with PR.
Yeah, so I think the biggest realization I had, so I'm going to go from like green artists, like when you're like very new. It's always exciting when you've got a new song. Like, don't get me wrong, like there's nothing better. Like, I'll show you. It's really messy. That's where I work. That's what everybody's going to see, because it's extremely messy, my room. But when I've got like a song in here and I've written it and I'm like all pumped up and like, like and excited, I got to like retain myself. And that's, I think, what's important, what I've really realized is like making sure your whole like release plan and everything is really well thought out before you even go to the publicist or the PR. Like before you even go to the PR, like all the marketing sectors, like before you even think about it, I think it's important to notice, like that's what I've really grown in knowing. It's when I write the song, what I want and where I want it to be, where I want it to shine, how I want people to perceive it, what type of markets I want it in. And look, I don't go too in depth. Like I make sure like I'm not just solid set on ideas, but I think, that's what I've learned the most working with the PR, what my idea for the release is. And that lead up time and all those type of things, and really discussing back and forth with my PR, Viv, and my manager as well, as to what will best work in every single way. So that's like social media, the time frame we release it in. Is it going to be shows? Obviously, COVID's kind of everybody's. I don't need to explain. And those type of things. And that's what I've learned. I hope that gives a good picture to people.
I think the good thing about doing a premiere too, I'm with you, Uda. I live for it. I love it. I've been doing this a long time, and I'm an old lady, and I still get really excited to tune in to the first time that a song for someone we work with is going to be on the radio. And the announcers just seem really excited about it, and it makes it sound really big, like it's a big exclusive for them, and it's the artist is exciting enough and important enough for them to, want that exclusivity. And another really great way to engage your fans on socials, to tell them to tune into this radio station, get the radio station some, love as well, and have people, literally, I can kind of sit there sometimes and you'll watch the Facebook page of the artist when the premiere is happening, and people are, jumping on going, that was amazing, and oh, this is awesome, and, I still get excited about it. So I think
I totally agree. Because I think premiere has like,
vibe.
Oh, sorry, go on.
No, I was just going to say, it's, there's so much arduous stuff to all of this that it's nice to have little snippets of exciting, good vibes where everyone's feeling it. Yeah.
I can give a little insight to everybody. Before COVID was happening, and this isn't meant to be like some depressive, well, what's me? So with my song, You Never Said, we had so last year we beat around, we went to EMC, we played, we landed a booking agent, that's niche. We're working really heavy with PR to kind of build the image around me, the live scene, trying to get that out there. And then we really landed a good one with Groovin' in the Mood. This year I was meant to be playing, which would be really exciting in Adelaide. And we were going to land that. And our aim for it was, with You Never Said, we're trying to aim for the premiere with Triple J, with Bridget and stuff. And we actually landed that. So that was like an extremely good boost and so exciting and stuff. But I think it's just important to note that if COVID hadn't happened and everything, I'm just trying to let people know that we had a plan to then get it on rotation, which it very well was considered for. But because my song was more miserable, they didn't want to play that because of COVID, and which is totally understandable. And I'm not pissed at any way, shape or form.
Well,
And on top of that, what we were planning for is rotation and then Groove in the Mood. So that was kind of my PR campaign for You Never Said. So all I'm trying to say is just make sure as an artist, you're aware of what you're bringing to them and you have a plan yourself, so then they can capitalize on that, rather than them sitting there going, what do you like? Oh, cool. Yeah, cool. All right, I've got to come up with something for you. So you give them something to work with. Yeah.
Well,
so that's what I'm trying to say.
How important is radio still for a campaign? Is it, if an artist isn't kind of connecting with radio, can they still exist without that Triple J high rotation?
For sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
100%. More so.
I mean,
Yeah.
I mean, it is. I mean, it is kind of more of a level playing field these days, where they can have the Spotify, they can have online high rotation, they can be hitting the right playlists. So, I mean, what is your message for artists that aren't connecting with radio?
Do you mean radio in general, or just like
A Triple J, let's say
Triple
Triple J. If they're not connecting with Triple J.
Triple J is an amazing tool, and it is obviously the biggest youth broadcaster in Australia, and to get on that is amazing. But if you don't get rotation, there's still ways of going around getting on Triple J, like Home and Hosed, and hitting up the producers directly to see if they like it. But again, going back to community radio, I hate to say it, less so in Adelaide, but more so in Sydney and Melbourne, have such a big community around it. If you can connect and develop relationships with the presenters on 2SER, Triple R, FEI, and develop your song there, it will generate its own lifespan on radio there without having to necessarily dominate on the Triple J, I was going to say bandwagon, but the Triple J airwaves. And there are still plenty of people that don't listen to Triple J and have their favourite community radio station and plug in, and then they'll find you on Spotify. And then as long as you have a campaign built around that, I think you can definitely create a very successful artist without any love from Triple J.
I think it's also worth noting, and I've kind of given the example to a few different people, but a lot of the ABC, Double J, Triple J, ABC local radio presenters have come from community radio too. Bridget Huswaite came from SYN Radio in Melbourne, and she's been we did like a bunch of interviews with her and Banoffee through SYN, and then it turns out we ended up getting one on Triple J, which we're really fortunate for. But I also just wanted to tap back to premieres as well. Online premieres are, not many media outlets do them anymore, a select few do, and you still can pitch for online premieres, but there are also some cool, if you've got a music video, YouTube and Facebook now offer premiere functions where you can schedule a premiere, have a countdown, have all your fans go online and write comments, and you can respond to them about the video as it previews for the first time. So that's also kind of a nice option if you wanted to do some sort of online engagement as well as a radio premiere.
Is it better for your strategy to have if you've got an artist that's releasing a single and then releases the film clip later on, is it so much more competitive these days where it's better to have all your assets and everything ready to go rather than kind of, doing kind of like a drip feed kind of thing?
It's great to have them ready to go at the start of the campaign, but I'm still a big voucher for drip feeding it, depending on the content. This day and age, content is king, and the more content you can put out there and disseminate to audiences and different audiences, I think the more bites of the cherry you get.
Has any of that changed with COVID as well? Like, have you noticed that you're approaching PR or releases slightly different because of the situation?
I think so, because usually you have tour dates coming with something that is topical for that local area. So the bad thing is that it's taken out that whole element that makes an artist relevant to an area that maybe is not as interested in them if, they weren't going to that area. But in saying that, the lack of international touring is really opening the media space up for local artists. So I think and for, releases, and they're still needing content, and that huge bulk of festivals and international tours has gone out of their content calendars. So for localized artists, I think it's a really good time to be releasing at the moment. I don't know if anyone else is experiencing that, but the stuff we're sort of putting out is getting a lot of pickup. The thing I'm noticing is that because a lot of people are working only 3 days a week, a little bit of extra lead-in time for follow-up has been really helpful. It's not as fast responsive as what we would normally have. So there's a little bit more hustling going on, but the spread of stuff is a lot wider at the moment.
Well, I mean, that's an interesting point. It's an interesting point because, with regard, the live music industry not kind of being active at the moment. And I mean, how often has it been such an integral part to a campaign? And with it gone, is it is it requiring your artists to be more active with other means for promoting their work?
I just think it needs to be good. It needs to be good more so now, because there's not that relevance of, you know, you should talk to them because they're going to be in town. You need to talk to them because of this and this. So.
And that's where, having those interesting stories and bits and pieces about an artist really tie in, because you can go, hey, they recorded this, like, here's some really interesting information about the album. Here are some, you know, they're a surfer. How about we try for a surf magazine? Trying to find those different story angles that media outlets might take, since they can't really talk about a tour.
That kind of leads on to a point that I wanted to kind of touch on. When you have an artist in a campaign and you're delivering kind of press to them all the time, how integral is it that the artist is then engaging with the press? Is that kind of integral for you to be able to keep going back to that outlet, or is that integral for the outlet to keep supporting the artist? Kind of, what is the relationship there? Or is it kind of, some of it's just like churning out stuff, you know, media is like, cool, we'll do this, but we don't really care. What would you say to artists?
Or like being selective about what media they do, or as in like once media comes in, how the artist supports the media outlet?
Yeah, more about how the artist supports the media outlet, I think, because that seems to be quite an important part, I think, in media wanting to cover stuff.
I think like earlier on, especially with smaller publications, getting your artists to reshare stuff on socials is super important. It's like a sign of good faith, because it's this, you know, smaller publications are going out of their way, whereas time not funded, et cetera. So you might as well show them some love on your socials because they wrote about you. That is very, not very important, but like, I feel like you don't really have the luxury earlier on. And also I feel like most artists, when they're starting up, like they're excited to share that someone had written about them or whatnot when they're first developing anyway. And maybe you might think that like the screenshot looks like shit, but like that's okay, because since maybe you can make up a little asset in Canva or something like that, and you can take a little screenshot and make it towards like your own formatting, so it suits your brand or whatever you need to do. But yes, definitely like in those early stages, maybe later in your career, or depending on like how far you are with releases or whatnot, you can be more selective with what you share. Because since you'll have like a multitude of publications covering you, or you might have overseas stuff as well. So you're going to try to be a bit more selective about what stuff you post on your timeline, and whether that also matches with like your marketing goals or what you're doing marketing wise, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah.
Yeah, that's great. That's valuable insight from all of you. We're just going to wrap it up, but I just want to just cover one question that seems to be so common for us with industry development meetings. It's, when is the right time to get a publicist on board? So if one of you or a couple of you had some insight on answering that question, I'd love to hear it, because that seems to be something we hear all the time.
I think when you have the money and you're not going to go into debt for it, then look at it. When you're so busy that you don't have the time yourself to do it, and you have the money in the bank ready to go, then go and sit down and start talking to publicists. I think if you need to go into debt for a publicist, you're not ready. And if you've got a lot of time on your hands, you're not ready. It's at that early stage. I mean, ideally you wouldn't get a publicist until you were so busy that you just couldn't do it yourself. Because I think at that early stage, when you've got, you know, you haven't got not a big budget, but you haven't got any budget, a lot of, you know, a bad PR campaign or a cheap PR campaign can do a lot more damage to you than if you sat there and started developing those relationships and following the feedback and getting the answers and, you know, seeing where you sit with those people yourself is a lot more powerful than paying a cheap publicist a little bit of money to not do much. It can just be a futile experience, in my experience anyway. And, you know, people, until you're ready to sit there and have those conversations of setting goals, having values ready to go, that laid out that you can, you know, communicate to somebody else. If you've got, you know, there's no point getting a publicist until you've got at least a full set of live music, that if your song goes through the roof and it does get picked up and become really successful, you know, you get given opportunities for support slots or, you know, festival slots, whatever that is, and then you can't take them up because you haven't got a full live set ready to go. There's no point having a publicist either. In my opinion anyway. I just think you're wasting time and you're wasting money, and a lot of those people that will take money to do a mail out without giving any feedback or any reports or any kind of longer term development for you, it's just a waste of time. You're better off, you know, establish, you do, well, it's a waste of time, but it's also a waste of whatever the song is or the EP or whatever you're putting out too.
I also think having like the understanding that a publicist isn't going to weave any miracles and like is going to do something that if you had the, you know, as Stacey said, if you have the capability to, you should know exactly what to expect from your publicist. And if you get a cool premiere or if you get a rotation, cool. But like having those, like I feel like I've seen like bands get a publicist on board, and maybe they might even be really good publicists, but it might be too early. And that band is like forever bummed out about that first publicity campaign that they did because instead the expectations were not managed. And I think having those expectations managed is super important, like internally for a band.
How do you manage expectations? Like, how do you kind of set someone straight right from the start without kind of poisoning the well?
I think you
frank conversations.
Yeah.
Say again?
Open and frank conversations.
Right.
And if
but also set expectations as well, and you've got to, you know, like I have that, and you guys probably have the same thing where we get artists coming to us and they'll say, you know, we did an EP with a publicist and nothing happened. I'll be like, okay, great. Well, what did you think was going to happen? And they're like, I don't know. And I'm like, okay, well, what did you want to happen? I don't know. And I'm like, okay, well, how do you know that nothing happened? And what did you, when you know, engage that publicist, what were your conversations about what your expectations were and how they were going to meet those and what their reporting style is like? What are you going to get back at the end of the campaign? How frequently are they going to be updating you on things? Are you going to get radio feedback or just a list of ads? Are you going to get, you know, press feedback or just a list of press clippings? Whatever, you know, the expectation is that you have the campaign, you have to have that conversation at the beginning. And so many artists, they don't have that, and they don't set the tone. And I kind of, and here's another onion analogy, but I equate that to, you know, going into Harvey Norman and handing over $3,000 for a flat screen TV and walking out without it. You just wouldn't do that. You'd research the style that suited what your needs were. You'd go and look at all the different sorts of electronics outlets and find out where the cheapest one that had the best deal was. You'd go in, you'd get the warranty, you'd talk to them about it, and then you'd walk out with the TV. So it's sort of similar to that. You've got to, you know, do your research and talk to other media, other artists, have a chat to the publicist, make sure your personalities are going to match up as well. That, you know, someone who's super controlling and bossy like me is not the best publicist for certain artists. They might need someone who's a bit more like light and fun and a bit more social. That's a really big thing. So I think there's a lot of kind of pre-work to do before you just hand your money over to prevent that outcome.
I think going back to what I was saying before, how I said when you get a release together, it's good to know, and I like what you're saying about, like, even if you did have the money, maybe it's not a good idea to just spend it on PR. Because I think, like, if you have a release together that's your own, like even if it's just a single, it doesn't matter what it is, and you know where you want to place it, and like you said, you've done all your research, like on the TV, we'll use the TV analogy. You've got some good analogies. So we'll use the TV analogy. If you've done your research and you know within yourself you can do it, maybe save that money for something else. You know what I mean? And like you said, and like you're all saying, I think it does come a point in time where you can't do it yourself and you do need a publicist. But I think for greener artists, try and do it yourself and get a really good understanding so you don't go to PR with a brand that I used to have, still do, but it didn't know as much. And I used to think that if you just went to PR, people just have PR, they're just going to be huge. You're just going to be big. They're just going to pull a rabbit out of the hat and be like, yeah, cool, you're big, which it doesn't happen like that. You know, it's a lot of groundwork. And yeah, I think focus on what you can do yourself before you go to PR.
I think, and that covers, that point earlier about doing something first before you get someone else or pay someone else to do it. I think it's really important that you've done those things. And I think probably the three that are most applicable are PR, management, and bookings. Like if you've done that stuff yourself, you kind of know where the pitfalls are, where you've messed up, where you're good, you're bad, but you also know the questions to ask someone else who you're paying to do it. And yeah, I don't want to work with anyone that doesn't understand what my role is. And yeah, it's about developing those expectations and all these conversations I have with people. I try and set the expectation about prior to PR about going, it doesn't matter if you've got the best publicist in the world. If no one really knows who you are, they're probably, it doesn't matter. They're not going to be able to get Rolling Stone to write about you, just because you're paying them. Like there's a relationship that they're building, and they're also not going to promise that that's going to happen either. So I'd say that's the exception. That's not the rule. That has happened before for some people, but just I think it is about setting those expectations and learning to do something yourself before you go and pay someone else to do it. Just because you think that's what you need to do, it really helps. And I think, Leigh, you would probably come up across kind of maybe some somewhat skewed expectations in Adelaide with musicians. Is that the case?
Yeah, sometimes it goes back to managing expectations. Like, end of the day, you can probably name the key things people want when they first come to a publicist, not knowing what a publicist does. Can I get on Triple J? How do I get in Rolling Stone or Tone Deaf? And can I get a feature interview? And I love it when they come with that kind of ambition, but then it is, I think, the publicist's responsibility to sit down with them and explain how it works and how we get there. Like, if you're a brand new band, there is a possibility that you will get on Triple J, but it very likely won't be this single or this release. But it's about that progression and developing it all the way through. And again, like, honest and open, frank conversations with artists go a long way in managing expectations and realities. And most artists I've talked to are very open about it. They will understand that there is a process. It doesn't happen overnight. And if you can give them a bit of a pathway to get that, be it 6, 12, 18 months plus down the track, they're generally happy to do it as long as they know there's a journey to be had. And the other thing, going back to when is a good time for a publicist, I agree 100% with what everyone else has said. But the other idea is come and chat to a publicist. Like, I can't speak for everybody else, but everyone in Adelaide knows that generally you can come and buy me a beer and I'll tell you who to hit up and what you need to do, and have those conversations and relationships with the publicists in your immediate circle or the managers in your immediate circle. And it's the best way to learn.
Absolutely. Beer and coffee get us anywhere in Adelaide.
It's a get all the way through, probably the whole way around the world.
Well, yeah, that's great. Thank you so much, everybody. That's
Thank
some
you.
pretty valuable insight, and I hope everyone that's tuned in kind of gained something from it. For those that are listening, all this information will be available via resources. We're available for industry development meetings, so by all means, hit us up. Panelists, thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Thank
really
you.
Appreciate it.
Been amazing.
I know for those interstaters, it's getting to 7 p.m, so apologies about that. But yeah, for us locals, it's only 6:30. So thank you very much for joining us. Really appreciate
your time.
Thanks.
Thanks, guys.
See you out there. Bye.